Well, while I was expecting that twist to happen, I certainly didn't expect it to play out the way it did at all, because holy shit. Hey guys, I'm here for Westworld, Season 1, Episode 7, Trompe L'Oeil. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right. I know that's like a command of some sort, but I was definitely looking forward to this episode. As you guys know, I've been loving the show, and especially after last week's episode, with that huge reveal, everything with Maeve figuring out what was going on, and her gathering all that information, and her discovery, and, just her realizing, what was really going on in the process of how she was made. I was really interested in seeing how this episode was going to be, and I have to say, they actually topped it with this episode. This episode not only was the best episode of the season for me personally, this episode in general, really showed me what the show is capable of. It was so shocking. There's so much to get into with this episode, so many big reveals, so many great scenes in this episode. And while everyone wasn't in this episode, because Logan wasn't in it, Lee wasn't in it, Teddy wasn't in it, even the Man in Black wasn't in it, it didn't matter, because the stuff that was in this episode was truly great, especially that ending. Damn, I have a lot to say about that. But let's just get into this episode, because there is a lot to get into. Definitely, probably my longest review for Westworld yet, because I have a lot to say about this one. But let's start into the beginning, which I really love the way this episode starts off. We see a flashback of Charlie, who we've heard a lot about Charlie, how we know this was Bernard's son, and how he cared for him, and he's calling out for Bernard, who's fallen asleep. He's in his son's room bringing him Alice in Wonderland, and Charlie questions a passage about not being what they are, because if they were, then everything would be what they aren't, and that is a very important line for when we get to the twist. I think it very much foreshadows what's going on. But he says he would be too. Bernard tells him he's perfect. He's going to beat his illness. And we don't know exactly what Charlie had. I am assuming it's some sort of cancer. That's what I'm led to believe. I don't know if it was. But Bernard continues reading, but Charlie says to listen to him. We hear the heartbeat go faster. And we then realize this is actually just Bernard having a horrible nightmare. He's clearly not over his son's death, which, how could you be? I mean, if you had a son that age and you had the bond that Bernard had with him, how could you get over something like that? I mean, this is clearly something that Bernard, I don't think, is going to get over for a while, but it makes even more sense why he's having these nightmares when we get into the end of the episode. But he then is interrogating Hector and asks if he ever questioned the nature of his reality. Hector says no. Bernard says he sees that he had a blacklisted exchange with a guest in the course of his narrative. He asks him to tell him what happened, and Hector says he wanted to cut off a piece of him to take it into his carry-on, that he wanted to mount it on the hood of his car for his friends to see, and he told him if he wanted a trophy, he could cut pieces off of him off and let him fish for them in the Olvido. And Bernard asks if this exchange made him question anything about his world. Hector says no, the world's as doomed as ever, and this episode confirms that Hector is in fact a host. I know some people thought that Hector was an actor and that he wasn't actually a host, but this episode confirms that he is, and I like that. I like that Hector is in fact a host, but I like that he's keenly aware that something's going on, and the big thing about the scene is that you know that he does know stuff from Maeve. Maeve said, look, I want you to help me. So he definitely knows that something's going on, but at the same time, he's clearly trying to hide it from all of them, which I think overall is very interesting. I think that scene really does add to this overall exchange, and I think definitely very well sets up, what ends up happening at the end. But Bernard then shows him a series of images and asks if there's anything that jumps out to him. Hector says they don't look like anything to him, and that line, again, is very, very significant. It's in the beginning of the episode, and it's at the end of the episode. It's said twice in the same type of context, and we'll get into that. But a coworker comes in, tells Bernard that they are through $15 of the backlog, and as it stands, they should be caught up by the end of the day. He tells him when he's done, there's a priority request for Hector from management, and Bernard asks him if he's seen Elsie. She was supposed to give him a hand on something, and we don't see Elsie in this episode. She's still in limbo. We don't know where she is, and the coworker says, according to the system, she started her leave today, and asks him if there's something he can help him with. Bernard says no thanks, and I think that perfectly sets up, where we're really headed with this Bernard storyline. So then we see William and Lawrence, who William in this episode, this is by far William's biggest episode yet. It's really everyone's biggest episode, but William in particular has some really great stuff in this episode. And the actor who plays him, I can't think of his name, but he really did an incredible job here. They're playing cards in the train. Dolores looks out of the window on the train. The train passes a series of heads mounted on poles, which according to Lawrence means they're in Ghost Nation. We don't know what that really is, but Colin then goes to Hector and finds him and Charlotte having sex. She says she thought that she requested a meeting. Charlotte says she did, and Hector tells Charlotte to go back there and bring Cullen, and Cullen says she can come back later if this isn't a good time. Charlotte says now is fine, this shouldn't take long. Cullen sits down, and Charlotte says she's very good at the job. The board has been very impressed with her performance so far, which is why they were so surprised with the woodcutter incident, which Cullen sees as a small setback, which Charlotte feels absurd. She doesn't understand why Ford is building a narrative either. You know, it just seems very much like they don't really need it, as we know. But as we know, Westworld is kind of dying. Like I said before, you know, she's there to kind of look over Westworld and see if there really is any reason for it to stay. That's what I'm thinking, at least, that Westworld, I think by the end of the season, is probably going to go out of business. I really could see something like that happening, but she smokes and reminds her that this place and the people who work there are nothing, that their interest in this place is entirely in the intellectual property, the code, the host, the mind, the storylines, and Charlotte says she doesn't care about the host. It's the little research project that Delos cares about. That's where the real value is. We don't know who Delos is. I'm assuming that Delos is someone that she's working for, like the investor in the company. I don't really know, but due to the lack of foresight on part of one of her predecessors, 35 years of information exists there, and nowhere else nowhere else. This is something the Ford has always ensured, and she says that she's a smart enough woman and asks her why he need to secure it all. I mean, there's clearly stuff that he's hiding, and she knows that there is intel that they can use against them. Some dirty intel, and I'm not talking about good stuff. This is like dirty, juicy intel they can definitely use against him. And Colin says because she's going to fire him. Charlotte says that she doesn't have to fire someone who created an empire. She asks them to retire politely. And if that person has the ability to snap his fingers and erase the value of that empire, they have to make sure they have a contingency. So they need to ensure that by the time the rest of the board arrives, they're on course for that transition. She says she likes her for the job, which is why she's going to give her another chance to get a handle on this particular bitch of a situation. But the gods, they require a blood sacrifice. They need to demonstrate just how dangerous Ford's creations can be. Again, remember that word, blood sacrifice. Very important for the end. She said it's nothing that obvious. They need someone thoroughly unexpected because she thinks they're going to go to Hector. But I like the way that Charlotte didn't just want to go to Hector. It'd be too obvious for them to do that. Ford already knew they had ties to him. Obviously, they can use him as an example. He's meant to kill. So they're going to use someone a little more unexpected, and we go in this really cool direction, which I'll get into, but I really did love the scene. I love the playing between Charlotte and Cullen, and I like the way that Charlotte's actually doing stuff. I was worried that she was going to be to the wayside and not have a ton to do, and there's so many characters, but they're already giving her just as much to do, and I really do love the way that Westworld is doing that so far. So then we get to the storyline that I obviously was most looking forward to watching in this episode because of everything going on with Maeve. She's in bed, she wakes up, she goes to the saloon as always, and she's a completely changed woman. You definitely see that. She ends up shutting off the piano, and she's not, you could call her a woman, a host, I don't really know, but she goes to Clementine and has the same conversation with her, except for asking her this time if she ever dreams like she is someone else. And it's kind of like that conversation that Abernathy had with Dolores, where he told Dolores that, do you ever dream like we're not supposed to be here? And Clementine says she doesn't think so. Maeve asks if she ever thought about this, if this is the life she really wanted, and Clementine says she doesn't intend to make this her last work. Her family's got a farm with bad soil and nothing grows. She sells money back to them. They're under the impression that she works in a dress shop, and she asks Maeve what's wrong. So I like that we're learning the reason why Clementine took this job, because we really have known nothing about her, and I like that we're starting to find that out. And Maeve asks what's wrong. She says she's just doing what she told her to do, a couple more years of this, and then she can have whatever life she wants. She says she's going to get her family out of the desert, and they're going to go somewhere cold someday. Every host then stops, and a few body shop workers, I thought, were going to go to Maeve. That's what I thought they were going to do. They were going to take Maeve because, she's revealing what's going on. They need to wipe her memory. But that's not what they do. They come in, Maeve grabs a knife. She's actually ready to kill. She's literally ready to kill them, and they take Clementine away, and basically they're going to take Clementine away because they know that this is obviously going to affect Maeve, and the way that they are basically just fucking with her just to fuck with her now because they know that she's onto them, I think is really interesting overall, and it really adds this whole other weight to the story that we didn't really have before. So Dolores and William are still on the train. He wakes up. She tells him he's supposed to be resting, and then we get this incredible scene with William that I absolutely loved. He says he's riding a train full with explosives through scalping territory. He's not sleepy. He asks her what makes her so sure the place she's looking for exists, and she says that she's not, and says her life before was so sure of the world, but now it all feels like a lie. Only thing she knows is whatever's out there, she's never going back. She is creating this life for herself, and will make sure that it stays that way. And she asks him what it is that he's looking for, says that Lawrence is right. He could have stayed in Pariah or gone back, but he's here with her. He says the only thing he had when he was a kid were books, and he used to live in them. He used to go to sleep, dreaming he'd wake up inside one of them because they had meaning, and this place is like he woke up in one of those stories, and he guesses he just wants to find out what it means, and that's really why he's been there. We've known that, Logan said things like, oh, you need to find your purpose, but he's really there to escape. This is escapism for him, and she says she doesn't just want to be in a story. All she wants is to not look forward or back. She just wants to be in the moment she's in. He tells her back home there's a woman, Juliet, and her father, who owns the company where he works, who is Logan's sister, and when he gets home, they're getting married, and he tells her that the place she's after, he is going to help her find, but he can't stay since he has a life waiting for him, and he says he's sorry. She says, of course. She runs off, but he actually does catch up to her. He actually doesn't just let her leave, and he tells her he feels like he's pretending, his whole life pretending. He doesn't mind, like he belongs. His life is built on it, and it's a life he's always wanted, but then he came here, and he got a glimpse for a second of a life in which he doesn't have to pretend. This is something where it's genuine connection. This isn't him just having sex with Dolores. He actually does care about her, and a life in which he can truly be alive. He asks how he can go back to pretending when he knows what this feels like. He then goes to her, kisses her, and then they start having sex, we see. And this is actually a genuine connection. I thought this was a really good way of separating this from every single sex scene we had in this show so far, and that is because those scenes are completely devoid of any sort of passion. That was just satisfaction and convenience and, just giving into the guest. That's all that was. It was giving into the guest. That was the host doing things because they were told to, and it was all just self-satisfaction on the guest part. This is completely different. This is two people who genuinely care about each other, who really do need each other, and who actually are having sex as a way to, really show that these two really do trust each other and that they really do care and that he is going to stick by here. And I think that's something that definitely was shown very well here. It shows how real this relationship is, and there's really nothing artificial about this at all. All the other relationships have been very artificial and very just, they haven't really been real, and this is the first one that actually seems somewhat real, and I think it really does show here. So Ford goes to Cullen and Charlotte, and this scene was awesome. Every scene in this episode is amazing, but this scene was really cool. He says he was not aware that those were a level of insight and any more reflection, and Charlotte says he's ever charming. Bernard comes in, and Ford tells Bernard that Charlotte and Cullen have a presentation for them. Bernard asks what it is about. Charlotte says that following the recent reports of gas malfunction, they asked QA to check the last abortive update, which featured the reveries, and she's sorry to report that Cullen and her team uncovered some worrisome findings, and they use Clementine as the example, which that was very smart. Who would have ever thought that Clementine would have any sort of mean streak or any sort of violent rage in her? Clementine just seems really innocent. I mean, she's hot, definitely, but she seems like someone that's very easily going to get taken advantage of, and that's shown that that's not the case anymore. We see the Cullen says to wake her up, explains that they sent her back to her previous update when they discovered the building was buggy due to the last minute, not the build was buggy due to the last minute interjection of a reverie code. They quickly rolled all the infected hosts back to their prior builds, and Clementine goes to them, says they're new. She's then attacked by one of the workers who beats her savagely. I mean, they completely just rough her up. Her nose is bloody, it's really bad. And Cullen says their tech is a host, one that had been coded for the purposes of the stimulation to as a human, and as they can see, behavioral safeguards are operating exactly as they would expect, and she tells Stubbs to reset her and wipe her memory. So Clementine then goes back to where she was. Cullen says to do this again. She gets up, says he's new, says not much of a rind on him, and this time around, she's the one to attack the host. She turns, and she really, straight up attacks him. She, beats his head into the glass. I mean, it's really bad. She almost turns on Stubbs, but before she can do anything, he shoots her. Cullen says in each case they examine the host. They are not resetting properly. The retention to data that hadn't been wiped overload their decision-making breakers and eventually caused a system failure that allowed for override their primary rule. Set the concern with the reveries is that the host will remember some of these experiences and they're going to act on them. That's really what's going on here, that they're remembering things that happened in prior builds and they are attacking, they're getting revenge on the hosts on the humans because they know that the humans did things to them. And Colin says that's exactly what she's saying. Bernard thinks it's ridiculous that, that the host responded to a grudge, but she's saying it's funny that he should use that word since what was most concerning to her was that several texts in behavior voiced those same exact concerns to the head of their department, and she says that he put this code out without proper vetting and without reasonable understanding of its ramifications, so either he didn't write it or he's getting sloppy to the point of risking their guests. Charlotte says a few things surprise her nowadays, but this level of negligence is fucking breathtaking. They're way beyond rollback territory, and with the next 6 months, they'll need to rebuild the host from the ground up, and he says he wants them to lobotomize them, and Charlotte says not him. After all, this was his responsibility, assuming that he had nothing to share with them in terms of his culpability. Clearly trying to get him to, goat him to get Ford, to rat on Ford, because Ford is the reason that all this is going on. It has nothing to do with Bernard. They're using Bernard mainly as a mole. That's what they're using him as. They're using him to get intel from, about Ford, and he doesn't budge. He says no, she then fires him, and again, keep in mind how loyal Bernard is to Ford. He can't even crack for whatever reason, and it's mainly because of how long these two have worked together. And that's one of the biggest parts of this episode, is how long Bernard and Ford work together, the history that they've shared, and even though they do have that bond, it does not mean that Bernard is going to be more loyal to Cullen. When it comes push to shove, he will always stay loyal to Ford over Cullen, and that's just the way it's going to be, and that's something that this episode shows very, very well, and one of the main key points this episode really is trying to show. So William then goes to Dolores. She says she didn't want to wake him. He puts on his shirt, and she says she knows last night was unexpected, and she immediately regrets it because she feels that this is just another chance encounter. This is just her feeling like she's getting close to him, when in reality, this is to her a one-night stand, and he's gonna leave. Dolores is so used to giving in to host that she doesn't believe, to guess, that she doesn't really believe that she can have a genuine connection with him, and I think that's something that William very quickly shuts down. He kisses her, showing that he certainly doesn't, and she says she knows he has something waiting for him at home. He says that feels so unreal now, and all of that to him, it just doesn't feel like it's reality. This feels like the life he's supposed to live. And even though it is a theme park, he feels like it is all very real. He came here to find his purpose, and his purpose is to stay in Westworld and be with Dolores. And he used to think this place was all about pandering to your baser instincts, but now he understands it doesn't care to your lowest self. It actually reveals your deepest self and shows the parts of you that you're really kind of afraid to show. And that's something that I think this entire show is really about. A lot of these, the things that the hosts are remembering are things that they don't really want to remember, but did in fact happen. And that's something that we as humans have to go through. There's certain things that we've done that we're certainly not proud of, but we have to remember. And he shows how you really are. And he asks her if she really remembers the look on Logan's face when they left him behind. He says he's wanted to do that for so long, to let him know how he feels about him. And then last night, he says, up till last night, he's actually never felt the way about any woman. She's unlocked something in him, and she says that she's not a key, she's just her. He sees a painting, and we get this really great scene where she says at home she used to paint landscapes, mostly because she was always just copying the world outside her, and we know that it was so repetitive. It was constantly just on this loop, but this morning she woke up and thought to draw something new. She imagined something beautiful, a place where the mountains meet the sea, and he says that everyone who comes here is longing for either excitement or conflict, and she's just dreaming of the opposite. She's not looking for either of those things. She's looking for something real, and she asks what he dreams of. The train then stops when there's a boulder on the tracks, and suddenly the Confederados approach the train. They go to Lawrence and ask what it is, and Lawrence says ambush. Dolores asks if it's the Ghost Nation. He says it's worse. They then shoot up the train with a Gatling gun, which was pretty cool to see. Lawrence sends out a corpse that has explosive inside of him. One of the coolest, I think, action scenes we've had so far. I loved everything about this, and we get this really nice chase scene where Dolores ends up falling off her horse. They actually use the explosives to mask their getaway, so that way they can't see them leave. And basically, Dolores falls off her horse, but William saves her in time. Right as the Ghost Nation comes to their rescue, they then approach a canyon, in which is the one that Dolores drew in the painting. And Lawrence asks if they're coming. She says once the ghosts are with them, they'll be coming after them, and his friends are itching to join the war effect. Dolores says she's had enough of war, and William agrees that this is where they part ways. Lawrence leaves, but not before warning them that they're about to approach unclaimed territory, which he is unsure what's there since no one's actually ever come back from there, which that I think very well sets up where we're going to go next week. Where they're headed, I have no idea, but again, that's something that's definitely very interesting. In fact, there is unclaimed territory. As we know, there are certain parts of Westworld that no one's ever found, and I think that's something that William and Dolores are about to find. They're about to find parts of Westworld that just haven't really been discovered before, and that's going to be very interesting to see what's going to happen with that. So Sylvester and Felix are at the body shop. They're operating on Maeve, and I really feel bad for Felix. I mean, constantly he has to deal with Maeve, and I obviously really care about Maeve. Like I said, Maeve is probably one of my favorite characters. She's not my favorite. After this episode, I know, in fact, who my favorite character is. Felix tells her she keeps coming down this often. People are going to start to notice. She asks where Clementine is. He says he doesn't know. He hasn't seen her. And he asks why. And she says to find her now. He searches her on the trackpad but can't find her. She warns him that he doesn't want to fuck with her. And yeah, that's true. I mean, you really don't want to mess with Maeve. Maeve goes to her where she's about to be lobotomized by Sylvester. And just the look on Maeve's face, realizing that she actually can't win this, that this is completely out of her control, that there's absolutely nothing she can do to stop this lobotomy. It's just heartbreaking, really. I mean, this is someone that Maeve confided in. This is someone that Maeve really genuinely does want to save and wants her to get out of this repetitive loop, but the problem is she can't do anything about it, and it's just Thandie Newton. Those are the moments that Thandie Newton is really killing it. As much of a badass that Maeve is still human. You know, she has a human soul in her, and I think that's something that the scene showed really well. So Cullen's there. Bernard goes to her, asks to have a word. She says she appreciates his professionalism, but he really doesn't need to bother with her with this, given the change in his employment status. And he says the test was a sham. The little show her and Charlotte put on, completely transparent from a technical perspective, clumsy to the point of making him embarrassed for her, and if he saw through it, he could only imagine what Ford must have been thinking. There were glaringly obvious marks of human intervention in the code. If her programmers were any good, they'd be working for him, and she knows her and her team were responsible for the stray. It's satellite transmission. He says he doesn't care, and he actually tells her that 40 years ago, Arnold wrote half the code this place was found on, and what she said in the lab was right. They don't know how hosts work, and that's true. That's one of the big points, is that really, when we get down to it, Ford is the only one who knows how hosts work, and even he seems to not have as much control, and he's convinced there's something wrong with them. Ford's explanation only bolsters his hunch. The ability to deviate from program behavior arises out of the host or call it past iterations. It just doesn't seem like something that obviously should be happening. So she asks if he's thinking that there's a connection between memory and improvisation. Out of repetition comes variation, and after countless cycles, repetition needs hosts. They were varying that they were on the verge of some kind of change, and she says that he needs to know her chief concern has always been the well-being of the park, and we've known that since the first episode. She's always been concerned about the park and how the guests are, and I like that she tells him to look, even though that I was the mole and I was the one that was, you know, did everything with the woodcutter and everything, I still care about the park, and the people in it, he says he knows, which is why he needs to show her something, and we don't know exactly what that's going to be, but that very well sets up the final scene in this episode. Sylvester and Felix are then trying to figure out how to say it to Maeve, and Sylvester says he didn't want to retire Clementine, but if he didn't do it, they'd just give someone else to, they'd get someone else to, and then they'd be suspicious of him, so he said yes, but he did it for her. Maeve says that he's always doing things for other people, says it's time to do more than one thing. All of her life, she's prided herself on being a survivor, but surviving is just another loop, and that really is true. I mean, if you survive, you're kind of just doing the same thing over and over again, and she wants to do something different, something that doesn't just involve her doing something, the same thing, you know, she wants some sort of change, and she says she's getting out of there, you know, she wants to get out of Westworld, and they're gonna help her, and he asks if she knows how far these people will go to protect their IP, says every part of the building, including the skin on her back, is made to keep her there. It'd be a suicide mission, and she says at first she thought that they were all gods, but then she realized they're just men. She knows men. She says he thinks he's scared of death. She's done 1,000,000 times, and she's fucking great at it, and asks him how many times he's died. Says if he doesn't help her, she'll kill him, and basically that's how it's gonna go. If he does not help her, he's gonna die. And the fact that she's actually saying that, we know she's serious too. That's what's so scary about this, that we actually know that Maeve is serious, but at the same time, I'm kind of rooting for her, because you know what Maeve can do, you know she's gone through, and I kind of am hoping that Maeve does get out. I have this feeling she's not going to, but I'll get more into that once we get to that. But now we get to what is arguably the best scene that Westworld has given us so far. where we see Colin and Bernard, they're in the elevator, and she asks him if there's a problem in the park, should they bring a security team, and he asks who they would trust, and he says he thought that he could trust her, for instance. She says she's not going to explain herself to him. She was charged with safeguarding the park's intellectual property, and he asks why it would be in danger, since she was the one who was stealing it. I mean, that's how it worked out. You know, she was the one doing it. She says that Delos owns the storylines, decades of work. Ford never allowed any of it to be backed up off-site. All of this could have been destroyed, and says that Ford is done, the board has indulged him long enough, and the corporation was concerned. He destroyed all the park's IP on his way out the door, and he asks if she thinks he'd let him destroy all the hosts, all their work, and this makes me think that that is the way that either this season or the show is going to end, with Ford destroying everything. I could very well see that happening. I mean, this is a show that is so easy to just, get characters out of their roles and just change up, change up every character pretty much, that I really could see that happening. But we'll have to see if the show really is willing to go that far. She says there is far more at stake than the host profile. Does he really think the corporation's interest? There are tourists playing cowboy. He says the longer he works there, the more he thinks he understands the hosts. It's human beings that confuse him. It's not the hosts. And Bernard takes Colin to Ford's secret cabin. She says this building isn't in any survey of the park. He says because they use hosts to do most of the surveys, and says that the hosts were programmed to avoid it. She asks about the unregistered hosts, and he says he doesn't know. He may have moved them, and she then asks Bernard about a door, but Bernard doesn't seem to see the door, and when she opens it, she finds a secret host-making facility. She asks about the equipment, and he says it's newer, slower than their machines back at the Mesa, but it will render hosts in a few days, and she realizes what Ford has been up to, and she finds designs for Dolores, Ford's younger self, and then, here's the kicker, there is a design for Bernard, which basically proves the theory that Bernard is in fact a host. We find out Bernard is a host, and really this all makes so much sense. The fact that, Bernard sees it, and especially the scene where she shows it to him, and he says it looks like nothing, which is the exact same response that Hector had when he saw a picture of him, and he says, it looks like nothing to me. And Bernard said the same thing. So Ford then arrives at the facility. He says that they cannot see the things that make them happen. He's spared them, that their lives are blissful in a way, their existence is pure, there's freed of burden and self-doubt. And he says he doesn't understand, and she says he's a fucking monster. He asks if he is. She says that she was the one who was so blithely destroyed, who would so blithely destroy all of them, even him, after everything they have shared. Bernard asks what he's talking about, because at this point, Bernard is so confused. I mean, she asks if that's why, asks if he told him to. He said that the intimacies were her idea, she'll recall. He thinks Bernard was glad of the company, and he says he's not one. He can't be. His wife, his son, the burial. He was a father, his poor boy, and I love the fact that Bernard didn't know this, that Bernard, again, was so in denial of the fact that he was under Ford's control. Ford then shuts Bernard down, and just realizing that Bernard was a host all this time, it just makes so much sense with the arc that we've been getting. A lesser show, this would be a really ridiculous twist, but it makes so much sense that Bernard is a host. I mean, just everything we've seen. The connection that Ford and Bernard have, it's not just that the fact that they've been working together for so long, it's the fact that Bernard is, in fact, Ford's creation, and he struggles with the realization he's actually a host. He tells her that he read a theory once, that the human intellect was like peacock feathers, just an extravagant display, which, let me just say, Anthony Hopkins was fucking creepy as hell in this scene. Like, I got Hannibal Lecter vibes. That's how creepy he was here. And I love that. I love seeing him being the mastermind, being this, not evil presence, because I don't think he's really evil. He's just corrupt with power. That's what it is. He's so corrupted with power. He is basically in control of everything, that he can't be stopped, and I think it's something that we really do see here. He talks about how they're all intended to attract a male. All their literature, a bit of Mozart, Shakespeare, and Michelangelo, and the Empire State Building, just an elaborate mating ritual. Maybe it doesn't matter that they have accomplished so much for the basis of reasons, but of course the peacock can barely fly. It lives in the dirt, pecking insects out of the muck, consoling itself with its great beauty, and she says that he has come to think of so much of consciousness as a burden awaits, and they have spared them the anxiety, self-loathing, guilt. The hosts are the ones who are free. They're under his control, and she says he's not under his control. He brought her there to show her this, and Ford reveals that he brought her there because he asked him to, and he's been very loyal for many years. And again, that was all because of Ford. And she says that his time running this place, like his insane little kingdom, is over. He's been playing God long enough. He says he simply wanted to tell his stories. It was her people who wanted to play God with her little undertaking. She asked him if he really thinks the board will stand for this. He says the board will do nothing. Their arrangement is too valuable to them. They test him every now and then. He thinks they enjoy the sport of it, and this time they sent her. But sadly, in order to restore things, the situation demands a blood sacrifice, which again, this is something that Charlotte was talking about, and we learn what that means in the worst way possible, where he tells her that he and Arnold designed every part of this place. It is their dream, and did she really think he would let her take it away from him? She asked if this would happen to Arnold, asked if he had Bernard send him out into the woods. He says he wasn't here those days. Bernard says nothing. Cullen goes to her keypad and tries to call security, but unfortunately the system's offline. She has no way of getting into security. Now, I don't know if this is because of Ford, or if it's just the internet was bad, but Ford then goes to her, says, like he said, he built all this. He then orders Bernard to kill Cullen, and he goes to her, and in the most selfish act possible, Ford gets Bernard to kill the one person that he cared about more than Ford, and he kills Cullen. He goes to her, and he leaves Cullen's body behind. Ford tells Bernard that they have more work to do, especially with the new storylines, and that is the way the episode ends. Crazy, insane stuff overall, so much to dissect and so much to get into. But let's just get into this episode and more of where I think the last 3 episodes of the show are really headed. So what an episode this was. I mean, like I said, I called that Bernard was a host from the very beginning. Something about him always felt like he was a host. It's the way he acted, the connection he had to Ford, the way that Cullen treated him, just all of it felt like he was, in fact, a host. Now, Cullen did not know. She was not in the know that he was a host and everything. Ford, of course, did. That's why they have that connection that they have. And knowing that Bernard is now a host, the big question is, was there actually a real Bernard Lowe? Now, I've heard this theory that Bernard Lowe, in fact, committed suicide because of his son's death, and it makes sense, because think about it. That is a past life that Bernard has had. The hosts are having nightmares about their past lives. So if Bernard is having nightmares, that means that this was, in fact, a past life. And I don't know if this means that he was human, or if this was another life that Ford gave him. We don't really know. But that's something I'm definitely interested in getting into, is how long has Bernard been a host, and how long is he, why did Ford create him? What was his purpose of creating him? We don't really know, and I think overall that's very interesting. But the fact that Cullen's dead is insane. I don't know how Ford is going to get away with this. I don't know how he's going to be able to cover this up. I mean, Ford literally made Bernard kill her. I mean, if he would have done it himself, it had not been for Bernard. And so Cullen's dead. I can't believe it. I don't think she's gone. I think we're going to get Ford probably building a Cullen host. I've heard a lot of people say that, but I think that definitely is where we're going to go. I don't know if that's actually where we're headed, but it definitely makes me wonder if all of these hosts, were they real? Were they actually hosts, or are these actual people that Bernard knew and he just recreated them? That's what I'm starting to think. I'm starting to think these people were in fact real, and these are just replicas of, their former selves, what they used to be, which I think, if that's true, that overall is very interesting. But we know that, he's capable of creating people that look like humans. We know that he's capable of making Bernard one. He even made himself one, for crying out loud. So if he's able to do that and has so much of his hand in the pot, I think very well he's able to, I think most of these hosts, I'm thinking, and again, this could be a bullshit theory. A lot of people said my theory about the maze is stupid. This theory is even stupider, that I think most of the hosts were, in fact, real people. I think that's what's going on there, but we'll have to see. And now, as far as Maeve goes, I am hoping that Maeve is able to leave. I'm hoping that there's a version of the show where Maeve gets to leave and she gets to seek out her new life, but we have 4 other seasons of this show, and I don't think things are going to get that easily solved. I think Maeve thinks that she has them on her side, and I think she does. I think that Felix and Sylvester are willing to comply. They're going to help her, but I don't know if she's really going to get away with this, especially knowing how powerful Ford really is. But Bernard said himself that even he does not understand the hosts, and Bernard doesn't really understand himself. I mean, that makes perfect sense why Bernard said that, and I think that's also very interesting. But Maeve leaving, I don't really know if that's actually going to happen. We'll have to see. William and Dolores, I love where they're headed. I don't know where they're going, but I love that these two are realizing that they need to be together, that they have a greater purpose, and that William's there to be in Westworld. He's there to be with Dolores, and William is slowly becoming my favorite character, I have to say. I really do love where they're headed with him. I thought he was going to be a cliched observer, and he's not that at all. I love that they're giving him this really great storyline. I love where they're headed with William overall, and I really just want to see more go down with him and Dolores. Their scenes, they just have such great chemistry together. Those two work so well, and I really am hoping that things work out well for them because I love where all that's headed. This probably the most heartbreaking scene besides Colin getting killed was again Maeve seeing Clementine be lobotomized. What is going to happen with that? Is Clementine going to give it a whole new life? I mean, we've seen before that when hosts learn things, they completely restore their memory and give them an entire new storyline. So I don't know if that's how it's going to go for Clementine, but I feel like that's what's going to happen. We'll have to see. I think that's going to be very interesting. And then the flashback with Bernard, again, was that real or is that just him having memories of a past life? We don't really know. But either way, guys, so much to get into, so many great directions that the show could get into, and I'm very excited to see what's going to happen with that. Also, how is Ford going to cover this up? Because Charlotte's out there. Charlotte is going to be looking for Cullen, and if she sees that Cullen's dead, I don't know what's going to happen there. And Charlotte's there to be kind of like an intern. You know, she's there to take inventory of the park. So obviously, this can't go well for Ford for that long. I feel like he thinks he can, but it only is going to be a matter of time before someone finds out. But that's my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys saw this episode overall. Let me know what you'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Where do you think everything is going? Do you agree with my theories? I know some of them are a little bit ridiculous, but I just think that's where we're really headed. But that's my review. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next one, which will either be for a movie review or for tonight's episode of Supergirl, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.